Jennifer. It's episode number 9. How's everything going with you?
It's going pretty well. So since we last talked, I binge watched a new show, I will say, that was not on our list. So I'm going to throw it out there.
Oh,
Kim's Convenience Store on Netflix.
yeah, we have friends who are telling us about that. So
It is so great. My husband and I loved it. It's just fun. They're quick 20-something minute shows, and you just really fall in love with all the characters. And my new favorite phrase is sneak attack. So you'll have to watch it to find out. But I heard you watched a show I recommended.
yeah, I've watched quite a few. I watched Warrior Nun. I watched. I'm in the middle of Schitt's Creek.
Yay, that's the one. I'm excited that you're watching.
Yeah, almost done with series 1. But
who's your favorite character?
I like them. I like them all. I think they're really interesting. Moira, I don't know if you picked up on this, but Moira has a very different, and I know she does this on purpose. She's an amazing actress. The character Moira, she has a different way she speaks with her family and a different way she speaks with outsiders.
Yes,
it's very polished when it's outsiders, or her polished version, I guess. It's very interesting. I just oddly am attracted to Dan Levy for whatever reason. I just think his character is just so neat and interesting. Yeah. And that's Eugene Levy's son in real life and in the show. So I'm excited to see what else happens. But let's talk a little bit about what's happening on episode 9. And it's titled Negative Nancy, Eager Ernie, and Permit Patty. And we have all experienced different personality types, at work and in real life. The challenge is at times, how do we align ourselves well with these different personalities and to help us sort of climb that corporate ladder or move forward in our lives, personal as well as professional.
I think, or just make our day better, right? Yeah. So that's so much of it. It's just, how do you have a better day at work, or professionally, personally, whatever, with those kind of personality types.
Absolutely. And then we have an amazing guest coming up, Courtney Ramsey, and she'll be discussing with us these types of personalities. So let's go ahead and welcome Courtney. Well, today we are joined by Courtney Ramsey, who has firsthand experience on how to navigate through workplace personalities, and she will share with us all her knowledge and expertise. Hi, Courtney. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So, Courtney, we would like to know a little bit about you and your background. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what's going on with you in your life and your bio?
Okay. Well, thank you. So mainly my background is in training and development. So I actually had the pleasure of working with Jennifer back in the day at Zelle Corporation, where we were in training and development. Long time ago, back when Zelle was actually Zelle, not Signet. And I actually had Neiman Marcus before that. And then most recently, corporate experience-wise, I was with JCPenney. And most all in HR functionality. So everything from a generalist position to training and development to also recruiting. But a couple of years ago, back in 2017, I decided to take a leap of faith and leave JCPenney on my own to create my own business, which is very creatively called Courtney Ramsey Speaks, LLC. And I really basically just left because I knew that in the grand scheme of things, I didn't want to keep climbing the corporate ladder. I really liked doing the work of training development. I loved having multiple projects to work on. I loved all the creativity that went along with that, as well as helping people be better at their jobs. So I started my own business, and here I am.
So Courtney, you also do, though, just besides doing training, you speak at events and do workshops. And I think we had an experience with you too at another organization we were at, where you came in and did a workshop for women as well. So that's part of your wheelhouse.
I like to say that that's kind of my 50-50 business. So 50% of my business is more of the consulting side, where people will hire me to do training and development consulting work. Everything from coming in and just training the team, or to actually creating content that I would hand over to that business to lead themselves. The other half of my business is speaking. So going to conferences, like you guys mentioned, I got to work with both of you on those conferences, doing breakouts, doing keynotes, sometimes moderating panels, also doing virtual events now that, coronavirus has hit. So yes, that's kind of 50-50 portion of my business.
I would imagine virtual events are getting to be very popular.
Yeah, they are. I think people are trying to figure out, if virtual is the way to go. I don't know that we really have a choice if you want to do training and development and conferences right now, but we're all still trying to figure it out and make it the most interactive and just really interesting, because people get a little zoomed out a lot of times. So
there's always problems with it, keeping the audience engaged, especially when it's a long training day or multiple days. So I can imagine how many more distractions there might be for an individual when they're working from home or not in office or in-person setting. So you have your work cut out for you, but you are a consummate professional, so I don't doubt that you'll succeed. So you have firsthand knowledge of all these different personality types, and the big thing we wanted to maybe explore and discuss with you is just how these personality types sort of interact with us, with each other, and how to leverage them in a way that will help us sort of be better colleagues, workers, and also advance in our careers. There's always certain personalities that may not be the best fit, but there are, I'm sure, ways to engage with them. So yeah, let's just dive right in, if that's okay with you.
I was gonna say that too, like on that top of that, I just want to say, as indignant as we kind of talked about having this topic, right? So, but what dawned on me yesterday when I had a conversation with Courtney was, for everybody who's been at home for so long, like, and not been in an office space physically, or they're laid off like us and not having to be deal with those people, like, you kind of forget about those personalities too. So this is a good opportunity for all of you. I think everybody, if you're employed or not employed right now, to brush up on those, some of those communication skills. You're used to just being with your family and not as many people, or you're doing Zoom calls. So you kind of can prep for who's coming in. It's not the people walking in and out of your office and that kind of thing. And so it becomes a skill that might not be as finessed right now.
Yeah, like we were saying yesterday, you forget things. I mean, everything from just basic recall of things I'm finding it's harder lately. But to your point, this is a practice skill. And not everyone's just a natural person who can get along with every different personality type. So the less practice you get on a daily basis, the less efficient you are at it.
Sure. It's a really good point.
I thought it might be kind of fun. Not everyone has been through a basic communication styles class before. So we can how about starting off with an overview of what the 4 basic communication styles are, and then we can dive deeper into the different ones you want to talk about. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen because there's a couple of basic questions I want everyone to think about in order to kind of pinpoint which communication style they might be in. And before we even get started, if you're listening in your car, wherever you might want to be, and you can't see the screen, think about a big square that has 4 quadrants in it. So you have like an x-axis and a y-axis kind of running through before. You have 4 different quadrants. Think about that. So think back to high school when you're studying graphs the first time, and you remember, the x and y axis in the graph, right? So when you think about the x-axis that runs this way, this is our expressiveness axis. What expressiveness is referring to is how much of a poker face do you have, okay? So if you have a poker face, you are low expressive, and you're on the left-hand side of that axis. If you are highly expressive, people know exactly what you're thinking just based on your face. You're on the right-hand side of that axis. So remember left and right. Which one do you think you fall on?
I'm definitely on the right.
Right.
You're right? I am too for the most part. You can tell me I'm very much expressive in my face, very animated. So I'm definitely on the right-hand side too. Now, the other axis, the y-axis, that's running up and down. That is really thinking more about your assertiveness. Now, not in an ugly way, but really more in terms of, are you an asker or a teller when it comes to getting your point across, right? Do you kind of, how much effort do you make in kind of swaying people to your side of the fence? Now, if you are highly assertive, you're going to be on the top part of that axis. If you are lower assertive, you're on the bottom side. So think about, if you are a teller, you're high. If you're an asker, you're low. Okay. So what are you guys? Are you top or bottom?
I think I'm in the middle because I feel like it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little bit higher above the middle part, I think, in terms of assertiveness, but I wouldn't say I'm on the very, very high end at all.
Yeah.
Because if you're also my kids, I'm probably really assertive.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that, because you usually have 2 different personality styles, one for work and one for home. I'm much more assertive at home too, but at work, I'm a little lower assertive. I'm more of an asker of people to do things. I like to say, if you're like managing a restaurant and the trash needs to be taken out, do you ask someone to take out the trash, or do you tell someone to take out the trash? Right?
Ask. Yeah.
I'm an asker. Do you mind, please? If it's not too much trouble, right?
Yeah.
That's me too. So based on those two things, expressiveness and assertiveness, you're going to find your communication style. Now, going back to that grid we were talking about, the box with the 4 squares, if you are in the upper left-hand corner, that is more of a dominant style or direct, okay? So that's exactly how it sounds. You are low expressiveness, but you're highly assertive, okay? You're more direct in your communication.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the upper right-hand corner, we call that more spirited or inspirational, depending on which school of thought you're applying to. That is the one who is still pretty much assertive, but also highly expressive. They're excited. They're the really fun people at the party. They're people you really usually enjoy being around. If you were in the lower right-hand corner, you are more of a steady person or a conscientious person. That is the one who is low assertive, but still highly expressive. They're more of your relationship people, and they're the people who really feelings come into play. They don't like being spoken to too directly. They're more about the feelings and the small talk and let's build a relationship. Now, if you are in the lower left-hand corner, you are more systematic or more of a conscientious personality type. And that means you are low assertive, but you're also low expressive. So these are the people who are kind of data driven. They like processes. They like linear things that go in a line. They like the backup information before they make a decision. And they might not be too people-y, if you know. Like they might be more introverted in times, or at least appear to be so. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so which ones do you think you guys fall into?
It's interesting because I think though, so let me ask you this. Is it possible over time that you change?
Yes, I think so.
She keeps saying that to me, and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's true.
Because when I was younger, I would definitely tell you I was a spirited, like in my early on in my careers. And then I think as I've gotten older as a friend of mine from China told me, you don't say older, you say advanced.
I like that better. Yes, me too.
So as I've gotten advanced, I think I've become more of a steady.
Okay.
Although I don't know, so both of you have worked for me.
We've worked for you, yeah.
So I'm curious to know what you think about me in that work style situation. Plus two, and different points in my career, because I was much younger, Courtney then, and then Jigna, it's just been recent. So
I would have put you in direct, honestly. How about you, Jigna?
I've seen you interact with different people in different ways. So I see you addressing the needs as they come, dependent on the different personality type. Some people require a direct message. Others, you can be nice and get the same results. I think you prefer to be nice and ask wherever needed. However, you're assertive enough where there needs to be assertiveness. Otherwise, the other individual will never understand what you're wanting to do.
I know exactly what meeting you're talking about too. Like
many meetings, actually.
There's one conversation I can remember, and I was trying to be more ask, and I did revert to the direct and be very like, no,
this is how it is. Yeah,
I'm not asking you. This is what you're going to do.
And it wasn't a butting heads type of situation either. Right. I think it was more some individuals require a direct approach, and others, and not to their fault or anything like that, but it's really how we individuals process information. If the 20-year-old me would have needed that direct, or the 25-year-old me or 30-year-old me, maybe, I don't know. But I would have needed that direct communication style. Now more so, I understand what the ask is over the direct one. So I think it's important to really have those changes within your communication style, depending on who you're speaking with. And I think you do that well.
So just based on y'all's conversation, 3 really big things just came out of there. First of all, do we all have a dominant style? Yes, we do, right? And to your point, Jigna, I think we all have a dominant style that probably is inherent in us, and it's going to basically stay the same throughout our lives. But to Jennifer's point, the more you learn and grow in your career and you learn what works and what doesn't work, you evolve to where you can flex to all 4 styles. and you know when you do or do not need to use a certain style depending on the person you're speaking to. And that's what I love about doing this class when I teach it for corporations is like, we'll do this little thing. It's like, well, based on what you've seen so far, what do you think of me? And I'll get all 4 styles. And I'm thinking, yeah, because I want to apply to all 4 styles in the room. And that's, to me, that's a really good thing. You want to be well-rounded. The other thing I would say that's really important is sometimes when you're flexing and that style isn't working for you, like you're trying to be more ask versus tell, but it's not working, or in times of high stress, you will default back to your dominant style.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, well, I tried to be nice about this, but now I'm getting serious, right?
Yeah.
So for my direct people, it's like, yeah, you might have learned to flex, but dominance will come back out. Same with my steady, conscientious people. If you're a little low assertive, you might try to be more direct, but in the heat of the moment, you might withdraw a lot because you're like, I'm not a conflict person. I don't want this. I'm gonna come back in and protect myself, right? So it really just depends on your style.
Makes sense.
So Jigna, what did you say you fell on this?
I would say I'm sort of on the assertive and expressive side. So
That's spirited.
But yeah, I think in my earlier career, I was more assertive than I am now because I've realized over time that you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. So, however, there have been times where, I've had to be more assertive because asking just didn't get the results that were required, not by me, but just by the situation or, management, whatever else it might be. So yeah.
I'm the opposite. So I started off less assertive and I am more assertive now.
Interesting.
Because when you work in corporate retail, time is money, and everything was, everything's a fire, everything's burning down. Seriously. So God forbid you could walk in and just try to shoot the breeze and take your time. It's like, no, just get there, get to the point. We got to move on. We got to get this done. So
time is money.
Actually, one of my first corporate job that I had, my manager was very assertive, but she was also very expressive. So there were a lot of times exactly how she felt, and it didn't feel good that you knew how she felt about you or others, right? Now, another manager I had was the exact opposite. She's very much, emotional. She's very interactive. She loves to interact with people, but she is definitely not assertive, and she's had to learn to. And I've seen her grow, over past decade and a half to where she's become, like you, Courtney, more assertive because that was a requirement because she saw. It was really interesting. I learned by observing now much more so than I ever did before.
Right.
Crazy.
And it's interesting because, as you say too, like different managers you've had over time, people you work for, or you start to think about the values or things that they've shown you, and you're like, oh, I want to be like that, but don't want to be like this. And so you try to figure out, how do I combine all these things I've learned or observed to what, at least in your own mind, is the ideal person to be in the workplace, right? So,
Courtney, that was a really great overview and insight on the types of personalities that are out there, and a little bit of insight on what I project out there, as well as Jennifer and the rest of us. So let's dive in a little bit on some of those specific personality types that are in the office. The first one I have on my list is the negative Nancy. No matter what topic of conversation, Nancy will find a negative thing to say about it. We all know a negative Nancy, and I think some of us have been that Nancy once in a while, not all the time, but in our lifetime. So tell us a little bit about negative Nancy.
Gotcha. So negative Nancy, and really any personality type we're about to start speaking about, I like to first think about what's their quadrant, right? Are they more dominant? Are they more direct? Are they more inspirational and spirited? Are they more steady and considerate? Are they more conscientious and or systematic? Because even though they might be negative, any one of those 4 quadrants can fall into the negative Nancy category, right?
So is a negative Nancy who's spirited, like, all right, guys, it's another bad day.
Excited about being negative.
Day. Like negative Nancy's gonna come to the office, and she's like, oh my gosh, you guys, I had the worst drive to work today. It was raining dogs, it was flooding everywhere, and then my coffee spilled on me. And then someone who's more considerate like me is gonna be like, really? Because it's just sprinkling outside.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I mean, you can fall into any of those, right? So I like to always first think, what category is this person falling into? Because that kind of helps me flex my communication style better. The other thing I always like to think about is, what role am I playing in this? Because negative Nancy's of the world, they need an ear to complain to. And sometimes we are that ear and we let it go longer than it should. And we don't find a way to excuse ourselves. So if this is not working for you, and it shouldn't be, because let me tell you, negative Nancy's rub off on people. I remember back in my first job at Neiman's, I worked in a very small office, and the person that I worked really closely with was fantastic. And I loved her, but she was very negative. And 6 months into my role, I was like, I hate this place. This is horrible, because it had rubbed off on me. So you got to be really conscientious about, really guarding yourself when it comes to negative Nancy's. So think through, what role are you playing, and can you kind of step away from this person? And it might be something as simple as, oh my gosh, Nancy, so sorry you had a bad drive to work today, but I have a call. It's in 5 minutes. I got to get out of here and prepare for my call.
And right now it's probably easier to avoid them, right? Because you don't have to see them person to person unless they start IMing you with their day, which I guess you can just kind of ignore anyway and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I've been on another conference call or something, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Now it's a little tougher in my opinion when you have a negative Nancy and you're the person's leader, because now you're like, oh great, what do I do with negative Nancy now? To me, that's where we got to start really thinking through. I'm gonna start asking more questions, especially if Nancy is complaining about clients or complaining about other coworkers. I'm gonna ask her to start getting specific for me and try to basically help her problem solve. I need to find out if this is just someone griping and venting, or if this is a real problem that I as a leader now need to help her solve.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of saw myself and as Jigna said, she said she saw me more in that steady, I think, asking area. I think because that's where I've gotten, where I've had to ask and learned as a leader over time, like, what's really going on here? I can't be your best bud, and I need to know, is this a real problem or not?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I've heard, I don't think you can avoid a negative Nancy in an office setting. There's usually one in the family. There's usually one,
and it's just not a female either. It could be a
no, exactly.
Negative
Nicholas.
Thank you. I was trying to think of a male name with an N.
It's all alliterations going forward. So just so you know. But yeah, they're going to exist. And you're right. As a manager, how do you sort of manage that situation? You hear stories, whether it's your coworkers or your friends around, and how they've dealt with negative Nancy's. One of them, I remember saying, they one of their approaches was literally just to avoid them. Hey, I'm busy. And if you're working from home, it's much easier, right? And some of them who've had that sort of the direct personality, or assertive personalities, they've one of my friends said, I actually just ask that person, hey, negative Nancy, what's going to make you happy? And the negative Nancy's generally don't know themselves what's going to make them happy, and trying to explore that. I'm not sure if that's a good approach or not, but I wanted to pose that question to you, Courtney.
I think direct conversations, first of all, it's one of my best things. I love giving any sort of breakout session or keynote on tough conversations, because I really think, especially in the workplace, we avoid them. I like to call it snoozing on them. It's like hitting the snooze button, like you need to take care of it, but you keep hitting snooze, and eventually that's going to blow up in your face when you're driving to work at like 75 and you're spilling coffee and like frantic, right? So yeah, you can't hit snooze on tough conversations forever, especially if it's someone you work with really closely. You can't avoid them. That's not an effective way of dealing with things. You're their leader. So absolutely. One of the things that I like to do in terms of starting any direct and maybe potentially tough conversation is always starting with your intent and saying that intent out loud. The reason I say that is, like, I think really 99% of conversations and communication mishaps is because we don't know where the other person is coming from. They think we do, but they don't. We don't know.
What? So you're not a mind reader?
I know we're not psychic. Do you know that's my dream in life? That's a superpower I want to have, but I'm not. But if I was to come at negative Nancy as a considerate, I'd probably come up to her like, listen, Nancy, I like you. I'm your friend. I want to continue being your friend. And I've noticed that usually when we're together, things aren't going well for you. I want to learn more about that. I want to learn how I can be a friend and help you out here at work. What can I do to help you be more positive? Is there anything I can work with you on? Because I really don't want you to be upset all the time.
Yep.
That
you
makes
know,
sense.
and then I'm softening things before I get into it versus girl, what's going to make you happy? You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's some good advice. You do have to look at their personality types and how they're going to receive the information. And if it's too harsh, they might just put their wall up and stonewall anything that you're wanting to say. So
and then they'll walk out and talk about how bad you are.
Yeah.
Probably.
They could, yeah. Well, I mean, of course, Jennifer, how dare you ask me to be positive, you know, obviously. But moving on to another personality type, eager Ernie. Now, eager Ernies, they always raise their hands first for every single task. Now, this attribute is commendable, and is there a time where too much eagerness is a step in the wrong direction?
Gotcha. So eager Ernie as a coworker?
Yeah, or just people in your life, right?
Just people in your life?
Yeah. Coworkers specifically, yes.
Yeah. You know, coworker, when you have that guy or that girl who is all over it, and we call it, to me, like they're like the yes people, they will do anything. I mean, and you're like, wow, that's a bit much. Sometimes realize they're doing themselves more harm than good, because a lot of times they're volunteering for tasks that are not necessarily leading to their career progression, right? They're more administrative things that might even be on more of a personal side for the person they're trying to help. That can be good in terms of relationship building, but it also could be detrimental in terms of really getting the experience you need in the role to move up the corporate ladder. So we need to be really conscientious of what volunteer activities we're actually raising our hand for, because our goal is to make ourselves more well-rounded, you know, dig deeper in the business to really develop those skills and abilities we need to move up. And sometimes eager Ernies are not doing themselves any favors. So first of all, realize that.
I think too is that having been in a managerial role like that before too, I get worried about those people burning out. Like how much is on your plate or what is not on your plate that you're feeling like you need to fill it up. Like that's something that I have learned too. Like that, I need to pay attention and start to look into that and understand where they're coming from. Goes back to like you were saying, ask a lot of questions. Why? What excites you about doing that? What, you know, do you just feel like you need to take it on? Get deep down and really what's going on in their head to why they're constantly raising their hand.
And quite frankly, as a leader, if they're not the right fit for that role, you need to be able to tell them that and tell them why too. It's like, Ernie, I don't think this is a good thing for you to take on. You need to have X, Y, and Z skills first before I give this over to you. Like, I'm not ready for you to go to the C-suite meeting, Ernie, you know? So maybe let them kind of give an idea of what they need to do before they can get to that task, because sometimes they're just a little overeager and they don't realize they're not equipped yet to take on that role.
That's a really good point. One other thing I wanted to sort of point out is that there are times where eager Ernies might do a disservice to their colleagues and their teammates. There are times where they're volunteer for every single task or project or, you know, whatever it might be. And now they have a loaded over more than their fair share of work, but then their teammates have less than, and they're not also allowing their team members to shine like them. It's sort of hoarding everything for yourself in a sense, or at least it's perceived that way. It may not be the case, you know, the intentions are generally good, but sometimes it's perceived as, hey, why is, you know, eager Ernie always taking every single task or assigned to every single project? Why can't I also sort of share in the successes?
Or I've seen where that person is also like, they gave that task to somebody else, but then they come like, oh, I had time, I finished it, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, like if you gave it to me, let me go do it. And if you needed it done faster, then you needed to communicate that to me. Like if you gave me like to Friday and today's Monday and you tell me Tuesday you finished it, what's going on?
Right.
No, I was going to just say, you know, in those cases, it's specifically, Jennifer, what you were saying around, you know, burning out. I truly believe eager Ernies are, they want to do the right thing. They want to,
it's not malicious.
It's not malicious, but they also don't, in this, they don't recognize how much time they have, and their time management is is lacking quite a bit when you come across this type of personality type, because they're just wanting to take, and then they realize they have to delegate, and then it's not being delegated in a proper manner.
Just because we love movies, Digna, it made me think of in Bridesmaids, where she takes all the dogs and she walks in and she has like 10 puppies and she's like, I might have overcommitted.
Yeah, it's like a really good idea at the time to have 6 golden retrievers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ernie's, you're both just spot on with that, because Ernie sometimes doesn't know. And again, he or she is not doing it maliciously. So sometimes you do have to, again, go back to that tough conversation, sit them down, come in with the best intent, explain why you want to have this conversation, which might sound like, Ernie, wow. I mean, you were like the superstar of this team, because let's give you a sense. Ernie's looking for some recognition here, right?
Oh, yeah. That's been my experience with those folks. Yeah.
Yeah, we love you. I can't believe how much you're able to take on. But I got to tell you, I'm concerned about burnout. I'm concerned that sometimes I'm missing out on some opportunities because you're first to volunteer for them. And I really want to share in those new growth experiences too, if you're a peer, right? Or maybe you would rephrase that to come from more of a leadership perspective. But if you start that conversation with the recognition, the pat on the back, wow, Ernie, you're amazing. And here's where I think it could be a problem. That could start the conversation too, in terms of getting to the bottom of why Ernie is doing this in the first place, and then coming to some sort of an agreement on how you can move forward, so Ernie's not getting all the prized tasks.
And I feel that with eager Ernies, it's important for the managers to really ensure they manage it. For the minute they recognize this is an issue, don't put this snooze button on that one, because it just perpetuates, and they'll alienate themselves from their coworkers, colleagues, and even executives who may be.
Yeah. And I think so, kind of transitioning here, I think an eager Ernie, like, they can also turn into a negative Nancy, because they get that when they do burn out. Or they can be like the positive Phyllis too. They can be always so happy, so excited to be like, woohoo, like, this is a great thing, guys. It's another great day. It's another day in the bonus round. And I try to be positive. I think there are times when I can be, like anybody, right? Have my moments, but I try to stay on that side of it. And the question for you, Courtney, is like, does this become a hindrance to always be that positive person at any point in those conversations?
The one place I've seen it become a bit of a hindrance is more in terms of, you could be seen as a little fluffy, I mean, use that word kind of like, oh, you're always happy. You don't see the problems. You're not a good problem solver because you don't realize there is a problem. So I would say that's, to me, the biggest word of warning I would give people. Positivity is a great thing. It's so good to have a good attitude, and be careful that you're not coming off as so head in the clouds above it all that you're not serious and strategic about the business. So
using really, I think, is because one thing I taught when I teach communication classes or feedback classes, I talk about constructive conversations, and constructive feedback is not necessarily bad feedback, like the things that you do wrong. Constructive means there's some solid content to go with it, so it's not fluffy. So I think maybe being a constructive, positive person too is what it sounds like to be in there, to make sure you're adding like why this is a good thing, and not just be like, hey, it's another great day. And yeah.
It's funny, you're making me remember when we were as JCPenney, we were training our Sephora managers to talk about their business when like the higher ups would come visit them. So you have a VP walking in, you have a district manager walking in. How do you talk about the business? It can't just be, oh my gosh, sales are great and numbers are fantastic. You have to be like, sales are great. We are running up in this brand. We are doing great in this skincare world. Oh my gosh, this is my star player over here. She just sold a $600 ticket. I mean, you want to have those facts and figures to really support the positive things that are coming out of your mouth, or even the negative things. This is a problem, but here's what I'm doing to fix it. So it's not a problem to be upbeat. Although, again, going back to communication styles, if you're over here in high-spirited world, everything's fantastic, and you have a very systematic VP walk into your office or your store, know about the facts and the figures, and they want to know about what's going on, and they're more monotone, play to that. You being over here is going to turn them off, right?
That's an interesting thing you say. So I will say, in a previous role I had to my report to, it was very quiet and systematic, and I would get nervous in the conversations with him. And I would tell you, I'm not normally a nervous person. Like, you could stick me on a stage of 10,000 people and I would still be like, and not nervous. when I walk in that office, even though I was even prepared for the conversation and have my numbers and send things ahead of time, I would find myself tripping over my words because he's so unexpressive that I didn't know what he was thinking. And I'm like, is this good? Is this bad?
The poker face, right?
But somebody just give me an indicator that I'm on the right path or not. Mm-hmm. And so, and if I wasn't on the right path, though, I started to learn, like, it was quick to tell me. And sometimes I'd be disappointed because I didn't even get my whole thought out. And I thought, was I not organized enough? Did I stumble over my words? Why couldn't I get that out? It was just a really tough place to flex in that style. And that's one that, like, I've learned a lot from that, and I'm still working on that one, on how do that just complete stoic.
Yeah. You know, and I'll tell you, you have to think about the quadrants, right? Typically, when you have something in common with one of the other styles, you have an easier time communicating with them. When they are your direct opposites, like think who's across from you in that quadrant, you're going to have the hardest time communicating with them because you have nothing in common. You're both, you're complete opposites. So you really do have to think through, what is this person's communication style, what they like and not dislike, and to your point, prepare for the conversation. And they're not going to all be good, even if you do prepare. Just be prepared and give yourself some grace. But it's going to be something you do have to really work towards.
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting, and it's that is one thing I feel like I've sort of honed. The skill that I've honed over time specifically is around addressing or speaking with the individual in their tone. I don't succeed every time. However, I recently had last year when I was applying for that job with Jennifer, I was also interviewed by other executive team members and whatnot. And I knew right away, just by looking at the individual, which quadrant without even knowing the quadrant itself, I'm like, okay, this person is going to be, pretty reserved, straight to the point, just by the questions that were being asked. They weren't fluffy, right? They weren't very long. They were very succinct, very short, and to the point. So I made it a point to ensure my answers were succinct and to the point. I don't do that well all the time. However, it is something I feel that I've sort of been taught, not just by observation, but by just, other confidants and stakeholders say, hey, listen, be straight, be short, move forward, so it does help. And positive phyllis sometimes can, a fluff, like you were saying. And one additional thing I wanted to just mention about positive phyllis is that it's great to have the positivity. I'd rather have a positive Phyllis over a negative Nancy, right? However, one thing positive Phyllis should really keep in mind is, are you really masking over the true issues that might be there in the office? If you're always wanting to be positive, which is a great thing, but are you also not recognizing the areas of concern or focus because you want to continue to be positive? So
are you authentic, right? We've heard that word a lot lately in communication, the authenticity of people. So I think at some point people start to see over if you are masking something, that positivity is not authentic anymore.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how authenticity has become such a big deal in the last 5 to 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know when I first started work, I'm being really polished and being really pulled together and being, always on was a really good thing. I got compliments for it. But I would swear about maybe 5 to 10 years ago, people started pulling me aside and like, Courtney, you're doing great. You're a good team player. You deliver, but I don't know who you are.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, well, you put on the mask, right?
Yeah. It's actually, this is my opinion, but I hope there's some research around this, but what I've noticed is that as the millennial generation, Gen Z, are kind of coming into the workforce, that is what they're asking for. And I jokingly call the millennial generation the hippies of our generation. And in some cases, I feel they have a similar thought process. It's about the world, it's about being global citizens. It's about doing good over making money, so it's sort of that, and the parents, the boomers and the Gen Xers are teaching that to their kids. It's more important you to be happy and instead of making money. So I feel like that's sort of what we're seeing now, and that's one of the reasons of the shift. Would you agree, or what have you seen?
I think you're right. I think a lot of it really we can attribute in a very positive way to the millennials because they are more, they want to be themselves more. And you know what? Power to them as a, I'm a kind of on the cusp, zennial or xennial. But it's funny. I mean, I really do think that that's a lot of the millennial generation is bringing that in. And I think it's a great thing because we do need to realize it's not all about work. It's not all about the money.
It's interesting. It's very interesting how, and it's a good concern because, who's out there, the leaders of the corporations are those folks that are the boomers or the Gen Xers who have been taught to put on a face, and it's a rightful concern. So we were talking about positive Phyllis. Now let's go on the other end of the spectrum and talk about quiet Quinn,
which also kind of goes back to the kind of that person you and I both talk about, a boss or form, people who get really quiet and stoic.
Yes,
they be that way, or they be so quiet and they're like also, I guess, on the right. They're somewhere on that, just they're non-expressive, right? As Courtney is saying, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Non-expressive. Yeah.
Now, quiet Quinn, like Jennifer was saying, they generally don't speak during meetings or even when asked for feedback, right? It's usually they kind of slide by. They may or may not do good work, just depends, but because they're quiet, they sort of tend to more so slide by much easier than the more talkative or outgoing individual. So, what are your opinions about this individual, and are there any ways to avoid conflict or with these types of individuals?
Yeah, well, to me, quiet Quins are the people who are probably doing a really nice job of avoiding conflict on their own because that's the whole thing. That's part of the reason they're quiet is they don't want to say the wrong thing. They're very scared of that. They don't want to be taken less seriously because they say a bad idea or what they perceive as to be a bad idea. So they're very guarded, like you said. I think as a coworker, you're going to have to work extra hard to build a relationship with this person and really establish that trust. And so, just really as much as you can going by their cubicle or their office and asking them questions and asking their opinion, preferably more on a one-on-one environment than a great meeting at first, right? Because that's where they're going to be more comfortable. But once you establish that trust, you can kind of build on that. Now, I was going to say,
is it finding what they're passionate about too? Because I sometimes think at that quiet Quinn, you find out what they're passionate about or what they feel strongest about in their skill set, that they will really open up about that.
Exactly. I think as a leader, it's one of the first things you should be doing.
Once befriending a quiet Quinn, is it unrealistic to ask or assume that he or she may actually open up? Will they open up? Or is it expected that they probably will stay the same and it just needs to be status quo?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to those styles again, right? You always have that dominant style where you're the most comfortable. So compared to a spirited or inspirational person, no, that Quinn's never going to be that person, right? We can't expect him or her to be that person. But I do think creating a safe environment for that person is really important. And so with the more the coworkers and especially the leader can do that, you're going to see some evolution. It might not ever be compared, to positive Phyllis or, that kind of thing. You're never going to get that level, but you're going to see some evolution. And I think that's a win.
And I will say I have this weird curiosity, and I gravitate towards two specific types of personalities. One is a quiet Quinn, and it's I don't know if it's a challenge or what it is, but I always want to befriend them and get to know them more. Maybe it's just me trying to see if I can get them to open up more. It's almost like a personal victory. Yeah. And the other part is very strong assertive types, and those are the two that I and it's not necessarily outgoing per se, but assertive. I find inspiration with the ones that are sort of leaders in their own right, because they were they had that assertiveness. To me, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not empathic, but for me, it means they're strong.
They know what they want.
They say it.
They're decisive. Yeah.
They're decisive.
I would say, I think this would be my hunch on the why you gravitate to some of those folks, because I do too. And I think it's the ones who are more systematic, because they are able to walk through conversations with me and figure out how to get that process in place. And we make a good team. I have a fellow coworker, you all three, both, or the two of you know who I'm talking about, I think, because has another J, that I have worked with her. She actually was my intern at Zale when,
That's how I know her originally.
That's how you know her. And then she's worked with me at several other companies. And that is what complements us really well. She is not as expressive and she's very systematic. And she has learned how to move into the other spaces. And but together, she and I can process information. Like she can take those crazy, like she says, I speak Jennifer. And she can take and she understands that, put them together. I mean, it's so crazy. One time I was in London. She was in Dallas, Texas. We were on a call trying to figure out how to do this one webinar we were going to do. And we had another training manager from the UK sitting in the office with me. And we're not even on video call. Okay. We're just on a speakerphone. And I'm like, well, we could do, and she's like, no, that won't work. I'm like, yeah, you're right. What if we did? And we never finished like the whole thing. And our other colleague, she was sitting there looking at me and she goes, what are y'all talking about? Like she couldn't understand like how we had an entire conversation with half sentences. And I think when you find your opposite, person there that you can work with and find, it's like this weird connection, and it can work really, really well.
Yeah, I got to that. My previous manager before Jennifer, we had worked with each other for 11 years or so, and we got there as well, and it's really nice to be able to get to that level, and it takes a lot of time, and we would always say to each other, get out of my head, because a lot of times, I'll say something she was thinking or vice versa, and then we'll joke around, there's that movie Mean Girls where the Amanda Seyfried's character, it says she, not the brightest bulb, but she's like, it's like I have ESPN or something. So that's our running joke. It's like, it's like we have ESPN or something. So
it is. I think the sooner we realize, oh my gosh, if you surround yourself with people who do compliment you, you're a stronger contributor because of it. Sometimes you got to get past those rough patches with the way you communicate and maybe the uncomfortableness, or like you were saying, Jen, earlier about walking into the direct person's office and you kind of got shut down. Like that's not personal. It's just how that person communicates. And once you kind of figure it out, it could be a golden combination.
Absolutely. So, let's talk about a couple others really quick here. Permit Patty. That person who is always looking at the rules in the office for compliance. And I think I worked with somebody one time. She sat close to the break room, and she would watch like how long people would take a break and think or lunch. Like if they were longer. In professional people, they were not like hourly or anything like that either. But she just felt like, or she knew too, because she could see when people came through the elevator, like some people, she felt like they just didn't have a full day, or they complained about that. And the environment I was working into, professional services, a lot of times people are working at home too, because they're doing consulting client work. And so you might have stayed up and worked on a project to get something finished at 1 a.m. in the morning. So that's why you rolled in at 9 a.m. And whatever it might be. So she was always constantly watching this. So, and then would make comments about it. Thoughts on the compliance person?
It's pretty clear who Permit Patty is, right? She's probably in that systematic, really conscientious category where like the process, the rules,
that's a good point.
The data, all those things are real important to her. So know that going in. There's something she's getting from that thing. That's important. But I would say just know that going in, it's important to her. And so, you're not going to change all that. But to me, this is the person that more than anything, if she starts to really rub people the wrong way, and there's lots of passive aggressive comments coming out, or there's a comment in almost like I'm taking notes on you and I'm reporting it back to the boss. This is a tough conversation that has to be had. So from the coworker point of view, again, starting with that intent of why you want to have this conversation, how it's affecting you, maybe give her an example of two, and then start asking what's going on there. Why do you feel like you have to keep track? Or do you realize, I came in at 9:30 yesterday morning, but I was sending my last email at midnight, So maybe she's not thinking the big picture. And then I think this is especially a conversation that the leader has to have with Patty if it's affecting the team in a really negative way, because she's probably not fully aware that she's doing it as much as she is. And she's almost certainly not aware that it's having a negative effect.
Which then takes me though to like the angry Andy, like the opposite, like why they may be watching it, but like the littlest thing like sets them off. Like they just like, they're a yeller, I guess, right? That they're in this perpetual like, we don't do it like that here, or I don't care what you think, or it's just, the littlest, and you didn't even know it was going to set them off, right? Like it's like, like you're like, ooh, I touched a nerve.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
back off.
It's like that Andy and Friends, right? Angry Andy, like the littlest things would set him off, and you realize that he's got an anger issue, and there's there's some serious concerns, mental concerns, and there's sometimes people just can't stop
Right.
how their mind works, and then that's most people don't want to yell and scream in work environment because they know how detrimental it might be. So I have a little bit more empathy for Angry Andy because I don't believe they do it on purpose. It happens. However, I also don't feel they have, some may not even recognize that there is a problem or want to recognize it. And many just don't get the help they require or they need because most employers aren't equipped to provide that kind of support, unfortunately.
Well, just as a public service announcement, if you are employed, just check. You may have an employee assistance program. A lot of people don't know about their EAP, and even though I was in learning and development for a long time, my last job I didn't sit in HR like for the first time in a long time, but most of my life I sat in HR, and a lot of people don't know about the employee assistance program. You can get up to like 3 free sessions. They may even do more things now, like now the stuff going on. So it's a good thing to check out. So.
I think there's two sides of Angry Andy, because there's a side that we talked about there's a true mental health issue, right? And that's probably something as a peer of Andy's you don't really want to tackle on your own. That's something that the leader needs to work with HR and to find the right person to really intervene. But sometimes there's just an angry Andy who doesn't realize he's being quite so ornery, and he just is gruff and he just comes off badly. I think that's a different situation. A lot of times, sometimes I always say, dig deeper. What's really going on here? Because is Andy just really burned out and he's over this job? A lot of times people just stop trying and they're like, I don't care how I sound. I'm over this job, right? So I think as a leader, you got to start digging deep and say, is this really the right job for you, Andy? Because you don't seem happy here, And the same thing with a coworker. You could kind of help them have that, come to the realization conversation too. Like, I got to tell you, Andy, especially if this is a change you've seen, like Andy wasn't always this angry and now we're over here and no one wants to approach him. Maybe you as a coworker with the right intent, again, going in with great intent and telling him why you have the conversation, why you care enough to have it. Maybe it's just helping him understand this is not the place for him anymore, or helping him just realize he's coming across rougher than he might realize.
Now, with Angry Andy, it's probably a good thing to have the empathic Emily around to understand. Courtney, you were talking a little bit about how it's the evolution of personality and the needs and the requirements, in a sense, by employers now than before, and not putting on that big face. I feel like this is another major requirement is the empathy. So having that empathic Emily, we've come across them, and I always want an empathic Emily on my side, right? So what do you think about the Emilys, the empathic Emilys of the world, and how can we sort of leverage that relationship to be more successful in our careers?
Well, I'm with you. I would love to have an empathic Emily in every area of my life, for home and for work, because they just make you feel good. They work to identify with what you're feeling, and they just make you feel like it's okay to feel that way. So I think definitely, finding a peer at work who you can develop that level of trust with, who you truly feel open to have conversations that maybe involve a higher level of trust and respect and confidentiality. I think that's just good for everyone's mental health. First of all, we all need that person at work where you just got out of a bad meeting and your boss just ripped into you and you need to go, not necessarily cry, but just have someone say, it's okay. You're not going to die, And so I really think finding someone who's like that is really important. But I don't know. I've never worked with anyone who was specifically like that to everyone.
Yeah, that's a good.
I have a manager I was referring to. She had a very high level of empathy, and I benefited from it and I learned from it. I would say my empathy level was much lower in my 20s, and it really did increase. And I noticed it she did it with everyone. It's just, it was remarkable. You don't really see that very often. Like you're saying. So I really held on because I knew this was special. This was something different. And now there's empathic Emily, and then there's also supportive Stu. And in my mind, they're a little different, even though they share similar qualities. Tell us a little bit about why they're different, sort of sets each one of them apart.
Yeah. Well, for me, supportive Stu might be supportive in a myriad of ways, right? That person might be the person who's kind of like your champion to the side. They're going to speak up for you in meetings. They're going to help, like maybe they see you kind of struggling to prove your point in a meeting. They're going to kind of jump in and kind of reinforce your statements. But there's also the emotional side, right? Where they're more supportive of you and your feelings and your just things that are going on a day-to-day basis that can, quite frankly, weigh you down. So whereas supportive Stu to me is maybe not as empathic, meaning they don't feel the sadness, they don't feel all the emotions that go along with it, but they're a fantastic person to have in your corner as a champion or a sponsor.
That's a good point. Now, are supportive Stus required to be empathic?
I would think they would probably have a bit of it just naturally, but I don't know that they're going to be quite as empathic as an empathic Emily, right? Because that's a whole, to me, that's a whole other level. And I always think people who say they're empathic in general, it's like they really do take on other people's emotions, and they say they can feel, like when someone walks into the room and they're in a bad mood, it changes their mood. They can feel it, right? And that's more empathy to me than it would be for supportive. But they have to have
Phoebe. Yeah, it's like Phoebe and Friends. She's like, "What's this aura? I feel this negative aura in the room. Let's get it out."
Yeah. Supportive. And I think really the one thing too, going back to both peers and leaders, for the supportive person, recognition is something they might not get a lot of. And like you were saying, Jen, sometimes not people, supportive Stu is always supportive. That's just who he is. And sometimes people just take it for granted and they don't express that appreciation and gratitude. So that's the one thing I would say when you're communicating with him or her. I mean, really just make sure they know just how much support means to you, and keep that relationship alive, and try to reciprocate too. Because a lot of times I think, going back to being burned out, you can be burned out of being supportive or overly empathetic too. So trying to return the favor is really big for those people.
That's awesome.
That's really good that's a really good point. And just recognition is good for any personality types, I feel. And when are managing mics useful in a situation?
So tell me more about managing Mike. Do you mean from a peer point of view, a guy who kind of stepped up to be a natural leader of the team, or a true leader manager? They have the title.
It's more so the natural leaders in the group.
So, gosh, there's a lot of good things about managing Mikes, because first of all, think about how many people are actually promoted to a true leadership position who have never been a leader before, even in a natural kind of team leader, unofficial leader kind of way. So as a peer, I would first of all try to help that person develop that natural leadership ability. So when he or she does get promoted to an actual leader of people role, they are better for it. So sometimes, I think people are like, who are you? Who are you trying to step up? And you're not the boss of me.
Yeah.
But unless they're doing it in a really bad way, try to appreciate that this person is really working to hone those skills. And then the other thing I would just say is, how can you help that person maximize his or her skills, but also impact you for the better. So from one thing I like to do with the managing Mike is I like to ask them for feedback, because not only is it giving that person practice to give me some constructive feedback and to help me get ahead into what he or she is seeing, right? But it's also giving them the practice of giving the feedback in a way, and then I can in turn give them feedback on how they gave the feedback.
That's awesome idea.
That's a really good point. When there are female leaders who emerge, they're oftentimes considered bossy or called bossy, but when it's their male counterparts, they're manager type, they're leaders, they're very successful. What can a female leader do to prevent herself from being considered a bossy person versus just being a leader like her male counterpart?
I like to go back to that authenticity and that intent. So, if for example, if I was a peer and I was coming up to you, Jigna, to give you some feedback, I might start out with what my intent is. I see you. I think you're amazing. I want to help you get ahead. I've noticed a couple of things. Do you mind if I give you some feedback? I don't want to come off as bossy. I don't want to come off as, higher than thou. This is where I'm coming from. And I think kind of softening it with that authenticity, I mean, really saying what you feel and then giving that intent will help soften that unfortunate thing that a lot of women do get stuck with.
Yeah. We're elevating each other as opposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to bring you down. I'm not trying to be, that girl. Yeah.
But to your point, the negative Nancy's need to be dealt with by their managers and not their colleagues in certain situations. So the approach, the authenticity approach is probably the best option there in both situations.
Yeah, the intent goes a long way. You really just say why, and not just, not the surface level intent, like really I care about you. Say the things that maybe you don't typically say at work. Mm-hmm. I see something in you. I want to help you get ahead. Mm-hmm. Things that people want to hear in the first place, but of course they need to truly be true for you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So we have one last persona type. And if you've watched our show, Jigna and I's favorite TV show is Seinfeld. So we're going to call this the crazy Kramer, right? The person at work who is always around, has, you don't know when they're going to show up. They pop up. I always think about kind of the one of wander in the office space. And they talk to everybody. They're fun. You want to be with them at the party. They if you had a company party, they see you on the Monday and they remember everything about what you did. And you're like, oh, maybe I didn't want to hear that. But they're just fun. Right. But at the same time, sometimes you wonder, well, what do they do? They might get promoted. You don't know how they got promoted. You're like, I don't really know what you do. And then if you ask them what they do, they might say something snarky like as little as possible, So what do you think about these crazy Kramers? Because I don't think there's a lot in an office space, but I always feel like there's at least one or two somewhere wandering around.
I sometimes first of all, I have to take a step back because I know Seinfeld, y'all's favorite show, because I was talking about communication styles today. If you go to Google and you Google communication styles on Seinfeld, ooh, one of the first or two returns on Google should be a PDF document by actually a fellow speaker. I think Margaritas is his last name, Peter Margaritas, but he actually puts each of the four main characters into the styles we've been discussing. So he put Jerry as more direct. He actually put Elaine as more spirited or inspirational, Kramer as that more considerate, steady style, which kind of thought, I'm not sure about that one. And then, I'm drawing a blank. Jason Alexander is
George.
George is your more systematic person. So I don't know if you agree with those or not.
No.
That's how he placed them.
In some cases,
but George is so, I don't even know if George is in the quadrant.
Yeah, George is his own special.
So self-aware. He's just he has no self-awareness. Yeah.
So we'll be sure to share this document on the comment section. So just be sure.
I think it's funny. It kind of, at the very least, it kind of gives you more of a descriptive of each style, which is great. I thought that was hilarious.
That is fun.
But Kramer's an interesting one. I think back to him on the show and just his craziness. And you're right. Appreciate Kramer for what he is, which is he is the life of the party. It's not the same if he's not there, right? Because he just brings that element of fun. And for me, that's usually more the inspirational, spirited people in that top right-hand corner. When they're not at work. It's just not as fun. It's just seems a little less happy, and it's not as camaraderie, So appreciate them for what they do bring to the table. And again, I mean, for the different leaders, the problem is this might be a hindrance to them getting ahead. So as a leader, you're going to have potentially some coaching to do. And it might be helping them understand how to better communicate to certain styles, because my guess is they might not switch their style and flex very well, at least not in the very beginning of their career. But really helping them shape their communication style and kind of really play to the different quadrants, I think would be very helpful for that person.
Or at least when I was trying to understand where I fit in, when you're first starting out in your careers, and some of these recent grads right now might be thinking this is how do I fit in? And then not only that, but also accept where you fit in. I think that's a big challenge. Is a lot of us may already know the type of personality we might be. We might not have the same definition for it, the official definition. However, we kind of know where we lie, but many want to be everything for everyone, and that's just not a possibility. And in the back of our minds, we kind of know that, but the challenge is, coming to terms with who we are. I'm never going to be a crazy Kramer, I'm never going to be the life of the party, but I want to be, so how do we sort of console ourselves and tell ourselves that it's okay that you're not the life of the party?
I know. I want to be Kramer too.
Right.
I really do. To console ourselves, we do have to realize, we've been talking about all these different styles, but no one is truly better than the other. Really, it's the best when we have a good comprehension of all four and we can flex to them accordingly in the situation we're in, because they all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. So know that although we might aspire to be, the spirited one, the inspirational one, and here we are over here, systematic, it's not a bad thing. You have gifts that person does not have. And I think the biggest thing is learning to flex and then finding those people who kind of help round out your superpowers. Like Jen was saying earlier about having the person who, her other J person who really helps, is like her, other side of her brain and can help make her dreams and thoughts and ideas a reality, right? Because of all the gifts that she has that Jen doesn't.
Well, this has been great.
It's
fabulous. Time. I could talk about stuff all day.
We might just have to, Courtney. Yes, I think we will be sure to share all the resources that we were talking about on our podcast today. So just check out the comment section or the description section. It'll be there. You can always find us on laidofflife.co, and resources will be there. So Courtney, thank you so much for joining us. This is a great reminder for us to continue honing our skills, our communication skills around these types, even though we're at home.
And now it's time for cookie time.
Yes. The fortune cookies.
Yes. So sometimes we'll share one with one of our speakers. So I have two here.
Love a fortune cookie. Love it.
So Courtney, you get to go first. Left or right hand? Which one do you want?
Right hand. I want your right hand.
This is for Courtney. Make the noise. The sugar like us to make the noise.
I'm actually the one who eats the cookie. I'm kind of sad I can't eat it.
I'm sorry.
Virtual. We'll send you a virtual cookie. How's that?
I should have brought you one yesterday when I saw you. Okay. Oh. Be prepared to accept a wondrous opportunity in the days ahead. So some new work is coming your way, Courtney. Right, there it is.
More stuff. I like it. Thank you.
There it is. I will save this for you. So next time I see you, I'm going to put it somewhere special.
Okay.
So, all right. Jigna, why don't you do yours?
Okay. All right. A purpose is the eternal condition for success.
Ooh.
So I need a purpose? I thought laid off life was my purpose.
Maybe it's the other project you're working on right now.
So. Lots of projects, lots of different projects.
Here we go. There's this one. Let's see.
All right.
Could I get some directions to where? To your heart.
Take a left, go straight, then two more rights.
I have never seen anything like that in a fortune cookie. That was unique right there.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. As Digna said, be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook. You're watching this off of YouTube. Where else are we at? LinkedIn, and our website is laidofflife.co. And we just thank you, Courtney Ramsey, for joining us. Check out Courtney Ramsey Speaks as well. Bring her on to your next show, event, conference. Yeah. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you
so much for having me, ladies.